Something big is happening in the world of business. It's kind of a quiet revolution. For ever, the goal was super simple: make money. But what if the most important metric, the thing that really signals success, can't even be found on a spreadsheet? What if it's not about profit at all, but about something, well, a lot more human?
Okay, let's just dive right in with that powerful statement from Dr. Shade Saban. It perfectly captures this massive shift that's challenging like 100 years of business school thinking. The old way, where profit was king, is being replaced by a much bigger, and honestly, a much more interesting question.
And that's the story we're getting into today. It's about how that big question led one guy, an accountant of all people, from one of the most numbers-obsessed jobs on the planet, to prove that well-being isn't just some fluffy, nice-to-have idea. No, it's the actual future of business. To really get what this revolution is all about, we have to start with our unlikely hero. He's not some guru or a motivational speaker. He's an accountant, a guy who stared at spreadsheets all day and finally asked a really simple but really profound question: why?
So who is this Dr. Shade Saban? Well, on paper, he's a CPA, an expert in all the really technical stuff like financial analysis and corporate valuation, the hard numbers. But, and I love this description, someone once called him an idealist in an accountant's suit. And that idealism is what pushed him to get a PhD in a field that sounds like the complete opposite of his day job, the economics of happiness.
Now, to be fair, Dr. Saban's ideas didn't just pop up in a vacuum. The business world was already kind of shifting, It was already starting to move away from that single-minded obsession with just the bottom line. He was tapping into a change that was already in the air.
If you think back to the 90s, it was all about one thing: maximize profit for the shareholders, period. Then we started to see a little change with corporate social responsibility, or CSR, which at least brought ethics into the room. And more recently, that's evolved into ESG, this whole framework for looking at a company's impact on environmental, social, and governance issues.
But Dr. Saban looked at this whole evolution and thought, something's still missing here. While ESG was a great step forward, he felt it was just too broad, kind of a jumble of different things. He proposed something way more focused, something deeper.
He called it Corporate Happiness Responsibility, or CHR. And the core idea is pretty radical. It argues that a company's main mission shouldn't just be to avoid doing bad things, but to actively promote the happiness and well-being of absolutely everyone it touches, from its employees and customers to its suppliers and society as a whole. See, ESG can sometimes feel like a big compliance checklist, right? Reporting on carbon emissions, board diversity, and so on. CHR, on the other hand, is a single strategic goal. It all comes down to one simple question: are our actions making people's lives better?
So here's the million-dollar question. If creating happiness is so powerful, why isn't every company doing it? Well, Dr. Saban's research uncovered this fundamental conflict, a sort of dragon guarding the old way of doing business.
And that's exactly the question he set out to answer. If we know making people happy is good for everyone, and, spoiler alert, good for business, what's the major roadblock? What's really stopping companies from going all in?
The answer, it turns out, comes from a classic economic theory called the agency problem. All that really means is that there's a conflict of interest. The people running the company day to day, the managers, don't always want the same things as the people who own the company long term, the shareholders. And here's how that whole conflict plays out when you talk about happiness. Managers, they're often bonused on short-term results, like this quarter's profits. Their focus is on avoiding risk right now. But building real happiness, that's a long-term investment. It's what creates brand loyalty and sustainable growth, all the things that benefit shareholders and society down the road. But it might not pop on this quarter's earnings report.
But look, a cool theory isn't going to change the world. Dr. Saban knew he had to prove it. He needed cold, hard data to show that this happiness stuff wasn't just a soft ideal, but that it has a real, measurable impact on the bottom line. So he conducted a huge study. He and his team went out and surveyed 1,500 consumers across the UK and the United States. They basically presented them with different scenarios about how companies behave, some good, some bad, just to see how people would react.
So the first big finding was exactly what you'd hope for. When people felt a company genuinely cared about well-being, they were way more willing to buy from them. Plain and simple, doing good was good for business.
But here's the crazy part. The other side of that coin was so much more powerful. Yeah, the reward for doing good was positive, but the reaction when people thought a company was harming well-being, it was massive. It was overwhelmingly negative.
As Dr. Taban put it, the penalty for doing bad is much, much stronger. And that right there is a game changer. For any manager focused on risk, this is critical. Ignoring well-being isn't just a missed opportunity anymore. It's a major financial threat to your brand.
And all this hard data connects directly to a massive cultural shift we're seeing everywhere, especially with the younger generation that's now entering the workforce and has all this spending power. Their expectations for what a company should be are just fundamentally different.
Dr. Tsaban sees it every day with his students. They don't just want a job. They want, and I love this phrase, manage a complete life. They want well-defined work hours so they actually have time for the gym, for their friends, for travel. Financial success is still important, sure, but it's just one part of a much bigger picture.
This quote from him just says it all. The old model of working from dark to dark just for a paycheck is being rejected. This new generation is demanding a better balance, and the companies that don't give it to them, they're going to lose the war for talent. Simple as that.
All right, so we've covered the theory, the big obstacle, the data, and this huge cultural shift. So where does that leave us? What's the final, crucial point of this whole journey?
It's this. For decades, we all just assumed that if a business was successful, then happiness for its employees and customers would just kind of follow. But this research flips that idea completely on its head. Happiness isn't the result of success. It is the new engine. It's the new metric. It is the new definition of success.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. Remember, this whole idea came from an accountant, someone whose job is to measure valuable assets. So what if the most valuable asset a company can ever build, the one that guarantees its long-term survival, isn't something you can count in a vault, but something you can feel in your heart?